So, as was said, I'm Rachel Brace. I'm a practice clinical pharmacist employed by a GP surgery in the Vale of Glamorgan. I'm often asked, obviously on top of what pharmacists do everywhere, helping patients get the best out of their medicines, what specifically do pharmacists do in general practice in a GP surgery? And they say a picture tells 1,000 words, so this is ours. I think it's fair to say that the pharmacy team aim to be the tiny ship of order on the vast sea of chaos. I think as pharmacists, it's fair to say, like things neat and tidy, and like to try and bring order and calm to the fairly chaotic and hectic world of general practice. So in particular, one of the things I think that pharmacy teams can really contribute to is I think that general practice can be vaguely drawn up into hot and cold, really. So the hot work stream being all the sort of on the day new illnesses that that come up all the time, or chronic conditions getting worse, flare-ups, exacerbations, that kind of thing. And that's kind of unplanned and very much kind of peaks and troughs and comes in waves. Whereas underlying all of that is the kind of cold stream, the planned things, the things that we do all the time, routine management of kind of trying to keep people as well as possible, all of the planned kind of recalls and reviews that we do in an attempt to keep our patients well. And it was that sort of cold stream, if you like, that felt like if we could bring some order to that, some organisation, sort of smooth the flow of that, it would improve the experience for all of our patients and hopefully improve their outcomes as well. So when I joined the practice, that was something I was really keen to kind of look at. How can we organise that so that it makes the best use of the whole clinical team? We've got doctors and nurses and physios and pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, healthcare assistants, as well as receptionists, all trying to work in partnership with our patients. So it was that side of the general practice business that I was most kind of focused on, and I think that's true for a lot of pharmacists working in general practice. So I was hoping to be able to develop some templates or guidelines that would help GP surgeries with the way that they manage this kind of cold stream, how they manage chronic disease management and the annual reviews, how they call people in for that, and how they tie that up with reviewing patients' medication in a timely manner so they can get the best out of their medicines, and also repeat prescribing. So I think for each practices are incredibly varied. We've got GP surgeries across the whole of Wales, operating in rural communities, in more urban centres. The types of patients they have will be very different, and the types of members of their team will be different too. So it's about setting up something that can be useful to the huge range of practices. But I think that the most important thing for all practices is to understand their own patient group and their carers and find out what's important to them. So one of the things that I would hope to be able to get from this meeting, and maybe if it's something that either you can think about as we go through, or maybe come back to me afterwards if it's something that occurs to you, is how best do you think practices can go about finding out what's most important to their patients? How do practices most effectively communicate with their patient groups, I suppose? And what we did at our surgery is, obviously this process is incredibly complicated. Lots of people are involved across the practice system. We used a quality improvement model called opportunity costing, which basically allows you to kind of map the flow and work out how a patient would be recalled every year, how they would go about getting their prescriptions every year, and which members of the team were involved in the old system. And it allowed us to kind of play around, if you like, with how could we use our team more effectively. What I like about it is it means that hopefully you make the mistakes on paper and you think it all through in theory, so that then when you do launch something, it's something that's relatively smooth for the patient experience. This is a deliberately complicated slide. So this is just an example. This is a made-up patient, but we have lots of patients in a similar boat. So this lady, she's born in July. She's diabetic. She's got COPD, respiratory problems and dementia and thyroid problems. She's on medication for all of that. She was called in, and this is fairly representative of a lot of our patients, for a separate diabetic review, COPD review, dementia review, blood test for her thyroid. She was called in for various other screenings as well around the cancers, vaccinations, blood pressure checks, medication reviews. She came into contact with the whole team in the GP surgery at lots of different random occasions. And what we thought would be, perhaps more efficient and easier for everybody is to have a one-stop shop. So instead of all that, complexity and duplication of efforts, to be able to synchronize, to have a birthday review. It's quite elegant. It means that we spread out all of our patients equally throughout the year. The advantage is that everyone's got one and most people know when it is. So the patients as well were engaged because they could remember. I think sometimes in the old system, people can't remember when their asthma review is due, and it feels like 2 minutes when the practice calls you back in again. Whereas at least this way, everybody knows when their review is coming up, everybody knows when it is. And we were then looking at how can we fully utilise our whole practice team so that the patients could have access to the right person at the right time, and we could match our patients to the most appropriate clinicians. So where you have a diabetes specialist nurse, and they're also able to do a blood pressure review at the same time, and then it's sort of a one-stop shop. So that's the way that we set up our system. And the benefits were sort of even higher than we'd anticipated and designed in. It freed up a lot of GP time because a lot of these things are best managed by other members of the team. We had repeated blood tests being done for different conditions, which meant that our phlebotomists didn't have enough appointments either. Whereas if you're doing everything once a year, a lot of those blood tests are the same. So there's that kind of efficiencies as well. We used to have a very uneven workload through the year, where there was kind of, peaks and troughs when we called people in, whereas this way they were evenly spread through the year. And it meant that we didn't miss anybody. We had much more confidence that we weren't going to leave anyone behind. And also there were no rushed reviews where a patient would come in to see their GP for one thing and the GP would think, oh, well, they're here, I must just rush through it and catch them and do a review at the same time. The patients felt much more sort of engaged and had ownership of it. I mean, I think an example of this, we launched this in September of 2019, and we'd seen about half of our entire patient cohort through this by the time the pandemic struck in 2020. And actually we had people, when we went into lockdown, one ringing us up saying, well, it's my birthday in April, what's happening? Which before we used to have to chase patients a great deal to get them to come in to have their asthma reviews in particular, but any of their annual reviews. So it was nice that they were chasing us. The clinicians felt more satisfied too. It's much more satisfying to have all the information you need to be able to do a completely holistic review and do what's best for the patient there. And there was definitely less duplication of effort. We had fewer prescription queries where things went wrong and people were running out of their medicines and people's prescriptions weren't running in sync because it was all being synchronized to their birthday. And so there was less sort of failure demand on our system, which freed up more time to be able to do things right. And the other thing is, in terms of our contract, the GP contract wants us to be able to allow maximum access to our patients. And if we've got the cold stream running as smoothly as possible and efficiently as possible, that means that we're able to offer more appointments for the hot stream and the kind of on the day and more emergency things. The other advantage, although we could never have predicted it, is that it put us in the best possible place to have a system that we could step up and down in a kind of a red, amber, green. As we went through the pandemic, as we all know, in and out of lockdown, on and off, in terms of, things were changing almost daily around what advice we were being given in terms of reviewing our patients who we could see face to face. At one point, we can get blood bottles to send the test to the lab because of Brexit. All of these things, these unforeseen things, we had our system and we were very quickly able to kind of go up and down and prioritise those at highest risks that, when things were tight and we didn't have staff or we didn't have supplies. So now it's a standing item on our practice meeting, and that escalation level's under constant review. So that's a sort of thing that we would hope to be able to kind of produce something that we could use as a model to share with other practices to see if it's something that could be useful across Wales. But I'd be really keen to gain a patient perspective on how that would help, or any comments that you would have, I'd find really useful. So if I did my email address there, if you prefer to get in touch with me after the meeting, but I'd be very happy to take any questions if anyone has them there.